Who do you think had the intelligence, and why does this matter?
The number one most informed country in the world on the goings-on in Iran is Israel. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I would agree with that.
There's no way the United States would have been able to launch against Iran without close coordination and incredible intelligence support from Israel.
And I'm going to disagree a little bit.
Why does it matter?
Because it means that Israel could be directing the activities of the U.S. military by the intelligence they select to give to the president.
So I wouldn't take that step.
Yeah.
I don't think Israel has a monopoly on intelligence provided. We know that MI6 has also historically been very active and very capable, probably more so than CIA has been, and in large part because the British government has an embassy, has diplomatic ties, has trade and economic ties with Iran, and the Islamic regime has seen the UK as a effective sort of pipeline or conduit to the United States and has used that in the past, sometimes to better effect than before. But I think that there's sources of intelligence that the United States gets, and Israel is influential, but I don't think it is the sole influencer or the one that pushes it over the edge one way or the other.
I wasn't saying that they're the sole, but when it came to Iran, and I think we're saying the same thing, they don't have the monopoly, but they're the
biggest game in town.
Exactly, when it comes to understanding what's happening in Iran.
I mean, I'm going to disagree because I think that, look at past situations where the United States attempted to do a decapitation strike and then have a regime change. You can look at Iraq. We tried to kill Saddam Hussein, failed, and then a disaster blows up. Libya tried to kill Gaddafi, fails, a disaster blows up. Iran tries to kill the regime or decapitate the regime and succeeds. So are you saying that you believe that's because in the other situations, the intelligence was coming from the CIA, who didn't have such great intelligence, and in this situation, the intelligence was coming from Israel, who did?
No, I'm saying that a big piece of the opportunity of Iran is tied to the opportunity that was presented to us by our allies in the region. I don't think it's just Israel. Saudi Arabia wants to see the end of Iran. UAE wants to see the end of Iran. Jordan wants to see the end of Iran. There's multiple allies in the region that want to see the end of Iran. But when it came to who had the longest, most reliable human intelligence source network inside Iran, I don't think anybody came even close to comparing with Israel.
And you're saying that was used selectively, meaning?
Because all intelligence that's shared with an ally is selective.
Of course.
I have 10 pieces. Do I give all 10 pieces to my ally?
No.
Or do I give just the 3 pieces that I think will move them off the X?
Right.
Well, they had to have those 20 individuals tagged to do their find, fix, and finishing. Period. End of story. It couldn't have happened without it. And I believe that the United States, the CIA, aggregates all that intelligence, SIGINT, all the ints, to know that. I can't imagine how Israel knew that more than the United States. That's where I would bet my horse.
Just to give you a very quick example, right? You're 100% right that people have to be tagged. When you tag a cell phone, let's just say we're talking about cell phones. Cell phones give you a geolocation. Every cell phone signal sends a geotag, but only on the service network that controls that phone. The United States doesn't have access to most of the service providers in the Middle East. So you already have to have someone to interlocute the Middle Eastern service provider with the West. And then on top of that, you then have to be able to identify that selector, that cell phone, belongs to that person. Again, if you think that the United States is so powerful it has every cell phone of every person around the country, around the world,
I think there's biometric tagging that is not necessarily electronic based.
So you're saying that I appreciate your point of view. The point is that Iran, according to every prioritized list that we have, is on the low end of our priorities. Russia's above them. China's above them. The cartels across Mexico are above them. Mm-hmm. So somehow we had such refined intelligence on...
What's your conclusion here, Andrew? Because I feel like there's a second half of your point that's missing, or like a conclusion that you're pointing towards but not saying.
Isn't it just the lowest of the hanging fruits of all the ones you mentioned also?
Correct. It doesn't. Yeah. So what I'm saying is it doesn't make sense that we would take this action unless we are really just acting on the behest of our allies for some other kind of gain, a personal gain for the Trump brand, if you will, some sort of hegemony that the United States is desperately grasping for because we realize that we don't have that power and influence anymore. And as a result of these actions and actions like what we took in Venezuela, we have now empowered and validated some of the worst regimes in the world that we've always held accountable for taking the same kind of actions that we take.
And who are you concerned about as it relates to other regimes?
China, Russia. Russia, I believe that a big part of the reason that Zelensky hasn't been assassinated by Russia is because that would be crossing a red line. That would infuriate Europe and the United States because you don't attack world leaders. We just gave them permission to do so. The same thing in Taiwan. Now China has free reign to just assassinate one person in Taiwan. And that's just them. We're not even talking about Pakistan and India. We're not talking about any of the border disputes that are happening anywhere else across Asia or warlords in Africa. We just validated these illegal, inhumane, extrajudicial processes all over the world.
So unlike these other world leaders, Khamenei was his philosophy, his entire ideology is built on death to America among death to other things. You don't have other world leaders. You don't have the president of Taiwan saying death to China. You don't have Zelensky even saying death to Russia. He might want Putin dead, but he doesn't want the demise of the entire Russian Republic. I think this is where Khamenei stands apart, where it is a movement which became a system of government predicated on the demise and the destruction of the United States.
What's interesting
How do you counter that? Yeah.
Interesting with the term stands apart is I was imagining therefore a spectrum. And the minute it becomes a spectrum, it becomes somewhat subjective. So, one might say, well, we think they wanted to hurt us. Whereas before in my head, when I grew up, I always used to see these wars and go, why don't they know where the guy lives? Like, I know that sounds like a simplified way, but they know where he is. Why don't they just take him out? And it always felt to me that was off the table in war. You can't just assassinate a leader because you don't like them or you're having a sort of geopolitical disagreement. And it's actually only in the last sort of year or two that I've thought, okay, maybe it is free reign to just fly in and snatch someone out of bed with their wife, which is what happened in Venezuela. And then seeing this, that you can just drop a bomb on them wherever they are, it does kind of make you, wonder, maybe this is now on the table. I've never really seen that in my lifetime. I mean, I know there were some things that went on in Libya and in Iraq and so on, but to snatch a prime minister out of bed with his wife and fly him over and with photos of it, I go, wow, this is a new type of geopolitical action.
It's what our Secretary of State is calling the golden era of the United States. The old world is gone. Like this is the narrative coming out and being spread by the representation of the free world. France, Macron just this morning stated that to be free, you must be feared. This is the world that we're creating. Death to America. Guess how much I care about that? Guess how much I care that a poor, broke-ass, far-away, fucking piddly-dink country says death to America. Guess how afraid I am of that? 0. And guess how afraid multiple people who have led the United States have been afraid of that? They're not. You can say it all you want. Doesn't matter. And when you do carry out an attack against the USS Cole, for every one attack that's successful, 25 of them are thwarted. That's the benefit of being the most powerful military in the world. You don't have to worry about everybody who chants in the streets. How many people disown their kids because they say, I hate you when they're teenagers? You don't care. You're like, give it time. They'll grow up. They'll be fine. They've got to go through their shit before they realize what it's like to be grown-ups. That's what we say about our children.
The other argument...
You can say the same thing about a country that just came to power in 1979. They're less than 100 years old. What do they know about how to actually be a country? What do we know? We're only 250 years old.
I mean, it's hard to swallow that, it's okay if you have a horrible, murderous, brutal regime making women run around in hijabs and ruining entire thousands of years old Persian civilization.
Have you been to this part of the world?
I have not been.
That's
there,
that's normal life there. What do you think is happening in the Hermit Kingdom in North Korea? I mean, shoot, look, Afghanistan. We left Afghanistan and knew that's exactly what the Taliban was going to do.
Right, but what's happening here is not, since 79 is not normal. But just to go back to one step for a second, who do we know launched the missiles that killed the supreme leader and all the other in the hierarchy?
I think the credit is going to the United States.
No.
No. The credit is going to Israel.
So Israel is the one that essentially pushed the button, pulled the trigger, what have you. The
United
U.S.
States provided the intelligence.
Exactly.
And
in which case, then, does Israel have the prerogative to take out a head of state that was, essentially the only nation state, might I remind you, that came out in support of the October 7 attacks? It was only Iran. Not even North Korea came out and said anything. No one else did. Khamenei absolutely said this was just and needed to happen.
On October 8th, he directed Hezbollah to join the war.
So therefore,
is
he a fair target for Israel?
That's a great question. Is he a combatant?
Yeah.
If a head of state authorizes funds, motivates, endorses, and basically encourages and shoves out the door your attacker, do you then have a right to go after them?
I think that's the $10,000 question here.
Okay.
Because if you're willing to see the leader of every country as a combatant, they are the heads of the military. The president is the commander-in-chief of the military. If they are a combatant, they are a legal target. So if they're a legal target, why is it against international law to attack head of state? And even more, what's the acceptable collateral damage? Because Israel is notorious for assassinations around the world. It's what makes them so difficult for other people to ally with, because we don't support assassinations. And most assassinations are not legal combatants. They're scientists, that's a civilian. They're experts, that's a civilian. They're heads of industry, that's a civilian. They're generals, but not in a hot conflict. That makes them a non-combatant.
The spaces you're talking about, the line between civilian and someone who works for the government or is on a government-funded weapons program or something of that nature, those lines are blurred in the Middle East. We know that.
Those lines are blurred everywhere. A civilian who works for a company that's hired by the U.S. military, is that person a combatant?
Okay, but those distinctions are far more subtle in the Middle East, and especially when you're a scientist working for a state nuclear program
that you're being forced to work for because you're one of the few scientists that can do it.
I don't know. Are they forced to work for?
Absolutely.
I mean, there are defectors. There are those who opt, and then there are those who double down and become religious cheerleaders, supporting what the government's doing. I mean, the point I'm making is that you saying it doesn't give you under international law the right to take out a head of state. What if it was self-defense?
That's not what it was.
I have a counter narrative here, just to throw it out and kind of switch up the discussion here. This administration is very interested in social media. And for that reason, I am too. And I saw a meme that was going around immediately after this decapitation event. So quickly, in fact, it made me wonder, who pushed that out that quickly? And it's a white sheet of paper with all the months of the year of 2026. And January, there's a picture of Maduro. February, there's a picture of the Mexican cartel leader. March, one day off, there's a picture of the supreme leader of Iran. And then there's a question mark in the other months. And it made me think and sort of wonder, speculate, is this messaging to Putin that he better start negotiating with Trump?
No, Putin's a whole different beast. What that's a message to is the leader of Cuba.
Yeah, Cuba, I was going to say, is next.
And if you follow what the United States considers to be the 4 state sponsors of terrorism, the only one that remains after Cuba is North Korea.
Every once in a while you come across a product that has such a huge impact on your life that you'd probably describe it as a game changer. And I would say for about 35 to 40% of my team, they would currently describe this product that I have in front of me called Ketone IQ, which you can get at ketone.com, as a game changer. But the reason I became a co-owner of this company and the reason why they now are a sponsor of this podcast is because one day when I came to work, there was a box of this stuff sat on my desk. I had no idea what it was. Lily in my team says that this company have been in touch. So I went upstairs, tried it, and quite frankly, the rest is history. In terms of my focus, my energy levels, how I feel, how I work, how productive I am, game changer. So if you want to give it a try, visit ketone.com/Stephen for 30% off. You'll also get a free gift with your second shipment. And now you can find Ketone IQ at Target stores across the United States, where your first shot is completely free of charge. This company that I've just invested in is growing like crazy. I want to be the one to tell you about it because I think it's going to create such a huge productivity advantage for you. Whisperflow is an app that you can get on your computer and on your phone, on all your devices, and it allows you to speak to your technology. So instead of me writing out an email, I click one button on my phone and I can just speak the email into existence. And it uses AI to clean up what I was saying. And then when I'm done, I just hit this one button here and the whole email is written for me. And it's saving me so much time in a day because Whisper learns how I write. So on WhatsApp, it knows how I am, a little bit more casual. On email, a little bit more professional. And also, there's this really interesting thing they've just done. I can create little phrases to automatically do the work for me. I can just say Jack's LinkedIn, and it copies Jack's LinkedIn profile for me because it knows who Jack is in my life. This is saving me a huge amount of time. This company is growing like absolute crazy. And this is why I invested in the business and why they're now a sponsor of this show. And Whisperflow is frankly becoming the worst kept secret in business, productivity, and entrepreneurship. Check it out now at Whisperflow, spelled WISPRFLOW.ai/Stephen. It will be a game changer for you. Why does the US care about Cuba? What's the context there? What does the US want with Cuba?
Well, Cuba's 90 miles off the coast of Florida, for starters. So geographically, it's very dangerous. Cuba was where the Soviet Union put nuclear missiles. They're, almost bringing the United States to the brink of nuclear war during the Kennedy administration.
It's one of the only countries in the Western Hemisphere that does not fall under the United States' sphere of influence.
I actually saw this yesterday.
The Cuban government is talking with us, and they're in a big deal of trouble, as you know. They have no money, they have no anything right now, but they're talking with us, and maybe we'll have a friendly takeover of Cuba.
Exactly.
So Trump says
Precisely.
that maybe we'll have a friendly takeover of Cuba. And he said that 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. So Cuba's next, and then North Korea? They wouldn't. North Korea have nuclear weapons, though, don't they, Annie? So
Yes, they do.
I always wonder that actually does getting to a point where you have nuclear weapons kind of mean the US will leave you alone.
Absolutely. I think that part of all of this is the sort of elephant in the room is that you cannot, the United States will not let anyone else join the nuclear nine. North Korea was the last example of that mistake during the Clinton administration, being told by the leader of North Korea, oh, no, we're not going to have a nuclear program. And then him not, deciding by sort of committee and all his sage advisors and following and talking to Congress and all of that, we're not going to attack North Korea. That would be unacceptable. That was the Democratic President Clinton's position. And as a result, North Korea developed nuclear weapons and now has nuclear weapons and the nuclear weapons systems to strike the United States, and has demonstrated, a desire, if provoked, or actually has said, if provoked, it would do so. And so, that was not going to happen with Iran, certainly not on this watch, and probably not on any watch.
Is there a bit of an unspoken rule geopolitically where if you get to nuclear weapons, you can do whatever the hell you want? And
It's the ultimate deterrent.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't mess with somebody who has a nuclear weapon, and you don't.
One of my friends was asking me this morning how the situation with Iran getting nuclear weapons is any different from the situation with North Korea having nuclear weapons, or is it the same?
Well, it's the same thing. It's only perhaps now this regime is up. We don't know what will happen with it, but having, an correct me on this pronunciation, the idea that the Shia idea that the sort of apocalyptic end is not necessarily a bad thing.
Oh, the arrival of the Mahdi
Yes,
and that whole thing, right? Sort of creating the conditions for that to come about.
There's kind of a undergirding the Islamic regime's thinking is this idea, and that's very dangerous to the idea that we don't want to have a nuclear war.
Though that regime is not suicidal. I will sort of state that Khamenei was prepared to die for his cause, but he was not suicidal in the sense that he would go out and sort of, if he could, I don't think, start a nuclear war that he knew his country was going to get destroyed fighting. That is, I think, one distinction. And I'm not saying North Korea is suicidal, but definitely what remains of the government there is not suicidal. I don't think there's ideological diehards as we saw in the founding fathers, of which Khamenei was the last one. So that changes it a little bit now that he's dead. There's the a philosopher, Eric Hoffer, he sort of wrote that great causes start as movements, then they become businesses, then they become rackets. Okay, so Khomeini's movement that started in the 70s, that was the movement. It became a business, a enterprise of which the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps profited immensely, till it became a racket. And now we're at the racket phase of it, and the only one really left are the racketeering leaders, and because the spiritual leaders are now gone. What happens next, I think, is sort of, we're now very much in unknown territory with that.